morning, Chris. Great to talk to you. For anyone who's not familiar with Kornit, would you mind giving us an overview of your hardware, your platform, and what you see as Kornit's place in the fashion technology ecosystem?
Sure. Nice to meet you, Ben. Thanks for inviting me along here. Perhaps I'd introduce myself a little bit. So I'm Chris Govier. I'm the president for Kornit EMEA, running the Europe, Middle East, and Africa marketplace, based out of here in Düsseldorf, and looking after the Kornit operations across the region. So I've been in Kornit now for just over 2 years. I have a background in print. I come out of traditional print. I've been involved with for the traditional print business for over 20 years, and it's remarkable the synergies that I see within the fashion and textile industry, and the digital transformation journey that's now starting to take. So Kornit have been around since around 2002. We really were the pioneers in the digital print technology on textile. And we've been through various iterations. We're currently on Kornit 4.0. 1.0 is really around the evolution of the technology and how we're able to print successfully and sustainably onto textiles. Then we moved into kind of the 2.0 area, where we moved into more of the textile decoration and started to look at the business from a direct to garment perspective, which is where we can print directly onto finished products. Things like t-shirts like I'm wearing here, which is the latest Max technology, and equally onto hoodies and those kinds of things. And then also in that time, around 2010 rather, we launched the direct to fabric element, which is particularly relevant for a lot of the brands and the retailers that we're looking at today, where we print onto fabric that then gets cut and sewn and made into garments for sale. And then where we are today, we moved into the sort of the Kornit 3.0 probably around 4 or 5 years ago, where we found we had this ability to go mass customization and retail quality, and that really opened up a lot more of the market space. And then finally today, I'll talk a little bit around where we see 4.0 and how we see that change coming in, and it's really taking us beyond the technology, more into the software elements, the ecosystem that we're looking to develop, and how we start to join up the constituent parts of the industry. So we pretty much started, as I said, on the DTG side of the business, so direct to garment. That was really our heritage and where we've had the majority of success. And really enabled that business to become very commercial, very attractive, and many of the world's leading brands at the moment are using our technology. Direct to fabric, we moved into around 4 or 5 years ago with our first iteration. And then a couple of years ago, we launched our latest platform. Some of the benefits that we have are we have some unique technology that enables us to print what we call wet on wet. So there's a pre-treat element normally when you're printing onto textiles that needs to happen. We do that within the system. It's a single-step process. We use pigment inks, which are extremely environmentally friendly, give fantastic kind of the durability and the wash and fastness and those kind of things. And as I say, we're moving now more into the software element on how we drive that demand and enable really the fashion on demand to meet that consumer expectation. So that's really where we are at the moment. It's a very exciting time for us, and I think we're, as a company, sustainability is at our very foundation. We believe that there's got to be a better way of producing and meeting that consumer demand and enabling brands to work in a different way, to disrupt the historical trends or historical supply chain that really has been has remained unchanged for quite some time. And I think digital really does offer a very different value proposition.
Yeah, it's interesting you say on demand, because it's a very timely word, right? Over the last 12 to 18 months, there's a lot of businesses have found themselves having to reckon with the consequences of holding inventory that they couldn't sell. And as a result, a lot of those organizations are now going to be looking at different routes to market. But I guess the question hanging over that is, how permanent a shift are we experiencing at the moment? Is the industry going through a short, sharp shock caused by COVID, or are we looking at a longer term shift towards on demand? So the burden of inventory, that was obviously highlighted by COVID, by the shutdown and the inability to shift inventory. But is that something that you think is going to fade as the pandemic fades? Or does the industry have a real imperative and a real impetus to transform towards on demand in a more durable way?
So I think it's a great question. It's probably slightly difficult to predict, but I think when you look at the history of what we've seen in the last 18 months, I mean, if you take the US alone, I think from April through to the end of June, we saw 10 years worth of growth on the e-commerce uptake than in that 3-month period. So it was much bigger in that 3-month period than the previous 10 years. So that alone has driven, massive change, both in the high street. We've seen it significantly in the UK, with many high street brands now closing as a result of the COVID and the online e-commerce push. And I think certainly from our business, we've seen exponential growth in the last 12 months, which is, which we don't see a slowdown. We've seen some opening up now of markets, the US, UK, as shops have reopened. What shops remain have reopened. And I think, to be perfectly honest, when we speak with many of the brands in the retail community, they are desperate to evolve their business to be able to create better value for their consumers. The traditional trends of buying long and buying big and bulk in order to get unit prices down, is just not sustainable anymore, both from an ecological perspective, but also from a commercial perspective. Supply chains crashed in April, May last year, where all of the brands and the retailers just canceled their orders, and it kind of had a domino effect all the way through. And what that's done is it's caused people to look differently about how they can do things. So we're seeing a retail meltdown. There's a consumer demand that drives this self-expression element of wanting to be a bit more personalized. The e-commerce continues to fuel that. And I think really, the traditional supply chains are really inadequate now for the way that the business works. There's a huge amount of write-down, of write-offs, and I think up to 30% of clothing that's made is never actually sold. So the ticket price at the end of the day that you and me and all the consumers at home are paying for, we're paying for that write-off. So, that's what we're seeing an appetite to change with now, but it involves, quite a lot of disruption and quite a lot of, I would say, a mindset shift from many of the people that we're talking to.
It's really an alarming such statistic when you put it like that, isn't it? 30% of products made are never sold. It's kind of hard to imagine any other industry where that would fly.
No, I think it's a really great point, because, if you look at many of the other industries, digitization and the digital transformation has happened already, or is still continuing to happen. As I said before, my background in digital print, we saw significant change, and technology drove that, but then consumer demand and flexibility kind of accelerated it. And it's very similar to what we're seeing here. We're an innovative technology company that created some amazing tech, 18, 20 years ago, and we had to allow the market to catch up to be able to understand how to utilize that. Now what we're seeing is really, nirvana for us, where all of the stars are aligning. Consumer demand is such that they want things that are individual to them, customized for them, personalized for them, if possible, and they want it tomorrow. So the long-term kind of buying habits don't kind of work in terms of the way the brands traditionally supply. There's also the ability to react to recent trends that may be pushing certain consumer demand that is impossible to do with traditional supply models. And then we've also got this ability that the retail element of the high street is closing down. So consumers don't have the opportunity of going into those places anymore, and they're not wanting to. They want that complete flexibility of being able to see virtual showrooms online. And of course, the advent of virtual showrooms is you're never out of stock with our digital production methodology. So, you might only be able to have 100 or so kind of SKUs or brand or items in a shop, physical footprint shop. But you can have thousands online that you don't hold in inventory. There's no warehousing. There's no kind of write down warehousing costs, etc. And ultimately, in that model, if you don't have it available, you can't sell it. In our model, you can sell it even if you don't have it. Then you make it. And so it really does tip it on its head. And that's the really exciting part that we're seeing right now.
Are you finding that brands and retailers are more receptive to flipping the model on its head. Has the mindset, the mindset that you mentioned, has that evolved? Are you finding that in the market now?
Yeah, very much so. As I said, I think earlier on in our conversation, I spent a week in the UK last week, an amazing week for us. We were visiting our traditional fulfillment network, so customers that run our technology that produce for a lot of these retailers and brands, etc. already. And we also had, a lot of time with many of the UK recognized sort of retail and brands. And what we're seeing is the vision and the synergy is just completely aligned. So they want us to be able to show them how they can do this, not just from a profitability perspective, but from a business model perspective. So the usual shackles of the traditional supply chain have to change. They have to be kind of let go. So, normally a brand would work on something called an intake margin that needs to be at a certain level in order to make sure that the exit margin works. But of course, if you look at it on a like-for-like basis, digital versus the traditional methodology doesn't work, because a unit cost doesn't work because of manufacturing costs, labor costs, and all that kind of stuff. But when you release the cost of inventory, the cost of write down, the cost of write off as well, don't forget it costs money to destroy a lot of this clothing that's produced, and the fact that there's lack of consumer choice, then it all comes together to say there must be a different way of doing it. And that's what we're hearing. I think the other element as well is that, government legislation starting to come in now around the pollution element and the ecological environmental piece. So as government legislation and levies start to come in on traditional methodologies, it does change the price points for us a lot. And as I say, there's no way to accommodate at the moment through traditional methodologies a consumer that wants to buy something today and get it tomorrow. It's just not possible. And we enable that fully with our digital system.
I want to pick up on something you mentioned a couple of times there, which is kind of accelerating the traditional model, if you like, getting things to people faster. Because as you mentioned, within the traditional supply chain, there's no way for something to be ready tomorrow if the consumer wants it to be. But the other side to that is kind of category agility and product type agility as well. So COVID's shone a light on the need for agility in an extreme way. People having to pivot from making apparel to making face masks. It's an extreme example, but it's emblematic, I think, of the broader need for retailers to be able to respond to sudden shifts in the market and bring products to market that actually meet those needs and fill those niches. Is that something where digital is going to play a role in your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, realistically, when you consider the agility element at the moment, there is no way that a traditional methodology can react to any kind of consumer demand. And, when you look at the sort of the key platforms, the influencers at the moment have a huge impact on what people are buying. And that's unpredictable because no one knows when they're going to put out all of their memes or all of their messages or all of their kind of things that go. And so we've got a complete ability to be extremely reactive through our technology. That means somebody puts something out on the wires overnight and consumers are looking where they can get it produced. People and brands that are running, or retailers that are running digital technology can have a range out there within a matter of hours, and hit that consumer demand as long as it lasts for. If you turn that around from a lack of agility, which is the traditional methodologies, even best case scenario, you're on perhaps a 10-week turnaround from order through to receipt of goods. Now, that initial order may go very well. You may have bought 3,000 or 4,000 and they may sell out. Then the retailer's got a choice, or the brand's got a choice. Do they go back and get another X number of thousand to try and see if the demand is still there, but wait 10 weeks for it to happen? Or do they say, actually, we've let that run its course, we'll leave that revenue on the table, we'll go somewhere else? But that's the choice they're having to make at the moment. With digital, you have it online, you have it virtually. As long as the customer's buying, you're selling and you're making and selling. So it does absolutely give you that full flexibility. I mean, we've got a micro factory set up in London, which is for our DTF system, the Presto S, with an automatic cutter guillotine on the end. It's all in line. And we had a major UK brand through for about 3 or 4 hours with us. You know, we brought them in, we showed them the technology, we showed the fabric being printed in a specific design of theirs design, and within 45 minutes there was a ready dress ready for them to take away. So it was printed, it was cut, it was sewn together, and you know, if that's not agility, I don't know what is.
We talked a few times here around speed. We talked a few times around being able to get either the traditional model to market faster, or being able to deliver on to respond to new demand, to respond to micro fluctuations and things quickly. But there's a difference between speed and fast fashion, and fast fashion obviously is predicated on being quick, but it's predicated on being quick at high volume and with disposable end results. Whereas what you're talking about is something different. So just explain to me the difference there between fast fashion and what you guys are doing.
So fast fashion ultimately for us has a very negative concept. It's a disposable, single-use kind of element. It's a little bit like the plastic industry, the plastic bottle industry, right? You know, single-use plastics are horrific for the environment. We also see fast fashion, not in its entirety, but in its concept, as not particularly great, because resources to make the clothing, you know, buying in bulk, selling it cheap. There's no value in there for a lot of people, and ultimately the consumer wears it once and will often just, you know, not wear it again because of the price is so cheap. For us, it's about putting that choice in the hands of the consumer. As I said earlier on, consumers will buy whatever is available to them. So they're in the hands of that, you know, it's a locked system at the moment that the brands and the retailers will give the consumer what they think they need, as opposed to the consumer buying what they want. So turning it on its head and enabling smart fashion, as I touched on briefly, is about actually having that consumer demand addressed through an ability to go digital, to, you know, design and customize for one, to then have something that you want to hang on to for a period of time. You know, anybody that wears something more than once at the moment is a win for us. And it's a win for the environment. So if it's 3 or 4 times, then that's exponential in terms of its benefits. And that's the same in many other industries. And I think for us, we want to enable the concept of that choice and the concept of the fast element, but we want to enable it in a more responsible way. So that's where we tend to differ. And I do believe that what we're seeing at the moment is that there's consumer demand for that, which is great.
On the opposite side of volume, we have incredible, you know, the demands of high fashion, of couture, where you're dealing in very low volumes, but you're dealing in very high quality. You're dealing in a complete lack of compromise. So can you tell me a little bit more about the role that you see digital playing there?
Kornit recently participated and hosted the Kornit Tel Aviv Fashion Week, which was a really exciting time for us because, you know, a lot of us are kind of technology background guys, and we're seeing this major entry into the fashion industry. And you know, when we talk of fashion, we talk about obviously high street retail, etc., but also home decor and kind of all-encompassing elements. But so all of the collections that were shown in the Tel Aviv Fashion Week were printed sustainably on Kornit technology, as uniquely. So sadly, because of COVID, I wasn't able to be there, but I was getting all these kind of updates from, you know, my boss and the rest of the exec team that we've been overrun with many really, really well-known designers, and they really put our technology through its paces. And there was a remarkable story where there was a particular model that originally wasn't able to participate. She was quite well known, and then finally at the end of the day, you know, for the last minute, the last kind of 36 hours before the event was going on, she became available, but then she didn't have a dress to wear. So ordinarily that would be an impossible situation for traditional supply chain methodologies, but the designer drew something. We printed it, it was made, and within 24 hours, she walked down the catwalk wearing this amazing outfit. And when you've got designers that at the moment are restricted to have to go out and find fabrics or decorative fabrics for them to utilize for their designs, it's extremely restricting. You know, they're kind of beholden to the people that are producing those in the first place. As we saw, the Kornit Tel Aviv Fashion Week was kind of a watershed moment for us as a company. We knew we had an amazing piece of technology, and we knew that we had successful companies running it, you know, worldwide. But we didn't quite realize perhaps how good it was. And then when these designers, these amazing creative designers who've worked for many of the world's leading brands, when they came and sort of took over our premises for a few weeks to produce this, there was so much emotion that came from them that suddenly the things that they had in their minds, the creativity that they had that was sitting there not being able to be executed on, they could then suddenly output and change on the fly from a slight blue to a red, or from a red to a green, or whatever it might be. Their world just changed, and suddenly everything became possible. And it was, can you try this? Can we try this fabric? How do we do on this substrate, etc.? And they just pushed the boundaries for us, which for us as an R&D tech company was phenomenal. It's so much so that now we're looking to go into Fashion Week in New York, and we've got some plans for Fashion Week in LA. And, we're really spreading this sort of message that creativity, design freedom, there's no limitations on design, fast reaction, no compromise. And primarily it's sort of, if you can think it, you can print it. If you can print it, you can make it. Is when you consider that 24 million tons of textiles are wasted 24 million tons of textiles are wasted every year, and 28 trillion liters of water, 28 trillion are used and wasted. That's equivalent to the US population drinking needs for over 72 years, and that's on an annual basis. So that's because of the utilization of making that clothing and then not selling it, and then it going into landfill. So whatever we can save on that through different methodologies has got to be good for the environment, and ultimately everybody wins.
Presumably a lot of that water usage, diaffluent pollution, that's coming from the dyeing process, the traditional dyeing process of sourcing greige fabrics and then coloring them.
And you've got huge amounts of washing requirements, both pre and post. The cotton, even the cotton industry, which is heavy water utilization, of course, even just making the cottons, etc., and other fabrics, natural fabrics. So the better we can make sure that the utilization of those resources, ultimately ends up in a consumer that wants to hang on to it for a while, then it has a major beneficial impact on the planet. I think also our technology, uses minimal water, because obviously some people will say, but hang on a second, what about your technology? We're a closed system, so our closed system doesn't involve, full amounts of water, because there's no pre-treat, there's no post-treat. So we are a single-step solution that enables us to, print seamlessly with minimal output of water. And I think the other thing as well is we've just built into our manufacturing supply chain, where we're offsetting our carbon footprint on the production of our systems, our machines. So we're planting trees at the moment that is offsetting the production methodologies of our technology. So, for us as a company, it's at the very heart of what we do. We're extremely passionate about making sure that we're playing our part, and the more machines that we sell, obviously, is great for us as a company, but actually it's great for us as human beings, because it's actually helping the environment, because it's changing the way that the environment works. And as the fashion industry is the second most polluting industry in the world, anything we can do is going to have a good impact for us.
So obviously we focused on the environmental side of sustainability in the conversation we just had, but there's a labor component to this, to the dyeing process, to the fabric sourcing process, and that's equally something that a lot of consumers are weighing into their purchasing decisions from sustainability point of view. Could you tell me a little bit about what sort of impact single step production, which is what we're talking about here, can have on improving that side of sustainability, the ethical profile, the labor component?
Yeah, I think it's extremely interesting. It comes down not just to our technology, which is, as I said, single step. So one operator can run a micro factory, which is not true of many other kinds of technologies. On our DTG technology, it's a single operator as well, whereas the traditional methodologies of screen involve many steps and processes. which is hugely environmentally bad because of the water that's required to wash screens, etc. But there's multiple sort of stages of doing that, which involves, many people labor-wise. But again, the automation piece around software. So the ability to have, almost seamless manual intervention before you get to the point of needing to sew, that's fully automated now. Aside from the need to load fabric onto the system, that's pretty much it. So that has a massive impact in that area. I think when it comes to ethical production, I think that's one of the other elements of onshoring and nearshoring, that visibility, although it's not strictly true, because obviously we saw in the UK recently that there was some, pretty bad press with let's call it less than ethical kind of labor elements. But we're partnering in London with a fantastic company called Fashion Enter, who are the only certified ethical production in the UK. They employ over 100 machinists. That's where our microfactory is located. And we sort of feel as though actually we have a responsibility to not just help on the sustainability side of things, but also on that ethical labor, certification, clarification. Consumers want that these days, and again, if I look at, again, my two daughters, that, they want that transparency. They want to know that if it says it's, ethically, sourced cotton, that it's not just somewhere in the supply chain, it's their t-shirt or their piece of clothing that has actually got the ethical, sourced cotton, or, ethically produced from paying living wages and those kind of things. So the whole argument really does encompass a whole lot of other things, but we do feel that with our methodology, it is completely transparent. It is very open. It's visible, and that's the other reason why people are bringing it. It's not just the time to market, but also you get a bit better control of being able to visibly see how things are produced.
I'm keen as well to see what your perspective is on the future of the sustainability conversation, and kind of where things are evolving and where you think things are going to go from here, from that point of view.
So I think initially, when you look at the sustainability argument, sustainability can be a foundation for a company. It can be a vision. It can be an initiative that people want to get involved in. And again, when I look at the conversations we're having across many of the brands and the retailers at the moment, they've all got roles that are senior kind of directors roles around sustainable sourcing, responsible sourcing, ethical production. And it's a really critical role that's that's getting a lot of visibility and a lot of focus. So we're sort of pushing an open door on that one, but we also understand there's still a need for them to be able to make money. So that commercial element is a trade-off, but that's why it involves a complete ecosystem change, as I referred to earlier on, releasing some of the shackles or some of the KPIs that people are perhaps targeted on. And ultimately the savings made elsewhere in the ecosystem will generate reasonable margins coming out the other side. So that's one element. I think as human beings, if you look back just at a holistic level, outside of the fashion industry, I think we've had a significant negative impact on the planet we're living on. And I see much of that through my daughter's eyes. I've got a 21-year-old and a 19-year-old, and they kind of understand more about the importance of us having some responsibilities to the planet. So I think there's a general consumer demand and movement that's moving us that way. So therefore the brands have to adapt at some point. But I also think the business model element also fuels that sustainability piece. The endless virtual variety that you can have online, as I said earlier on, 400, 500 kinds of items in a shop versus 4,000, 5,000 held virtually. It's just, it just ties right back into that consumer demand. Consumers at the moment are only buying whatever the suppliers will give them or whatever the brands will give them. And so as a result, you don't have a choice really. You just take whatever's available. But actually, we're enabling that huge amounts of virtual variety. And I think flexible inventory management is another massive one. Holding huge warehouses full of stuff that's never going to be sold. We've got an ability to repurpose a lot of that. If it's t-shirts that didn't sell that maybe have got images on that we can then print over the top to make it relevant, etc., then there's another opportunity there. And I think the in-season reactivity, as I've spoken about before, you can't have thousands and thousands of garments that are just not relevant for where the consumer demand is right now. So
on the other end of the spectrum from rapidly changing consumer demand that's demanding agility is agility in the supply chain, resilience in the supply chain. The pandemic is, again, it's been a very extreme example of forces that were already conspiring to make a very complex and very fragile supply chain, and it's exposed, I think, some of the cracks in the foundations that make up that long-standing supply chain. And as a consequence, there are going to be brands that are reevaluating how and where they source and produce, but actually shifting that traditional offshore production around from region to region is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. And I get the impression from the conversation we're having that that's something that digital is going to be able to enable. It's going to be able to give people that flexibility and that resilience to reallocate things, to move things around if the circumstances require that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because I think when you look at many of the brands, retailers at the moment, they're not specifically isolated into one country now. They have, many countries that they support and serve, certainly the bigger ones. And even some of the medium-sized ones want to open up more trees and sell to, consumers. So the digital production offers, real transformational benefits. We purchased a company a couple of years ago called Custom Gateway. They're a software company, software platform. It's a workflow element. And it enables effectively us to be able to join up what we call the fulfillment network, or the print partners, and the brands and the retailers that have got that kind of demand creation. So onshoring, nearshoring is a real major trend we're seeing right now. How can you get closer to proximity production to the end consumer? So there's again two parts to it really for us on the direct to garment side of things and the direct to fabric side of things. The direct to garment side of things, we're a bit more ahead, we're a bit more advanced. We've got 1,500 customers globally that work with us and run our technology. And so a UK brand, for example, that wants to sell to customers in Australia. So we would set them up through utilizing our workflow platform that enables a dovetail into their current website or their current e-commerce platform. And a consumer in Australia can log into that platform. It looks very similar to a site that's based in Australia, for example, but it could be hosted in the UK. There's no inventory. The consumer buys what they want. They choose their t-shirt, they customize it with the different color, the different size, the different shapes, etc. Choose the image they want onto it. They hit print, or rather they hit purchase. It's kind of print behind that. And then ultimately this workflow will locate and route that job through to the nearest certified Kornit fulfillment partner that's located nearest to that consumer. And it will be kind of almost last mile delivery in the packaging of that particular brand. These fulfillments and these print providers will work for multiple different brands, so they're able to do all the logistics and the delivery, etc. from it. And that is something you can't do any other way without digital. So it's transferring the jobs virtually around the world, closer to the proximity of the consumer. And you're not again dealing with large inventories that if you don't have it, you can't sell it.
I very recently published a bit of an opinion piece where I was kind of painting a vision of what it would look like to do a CDN for fashion, content distribution network for product, essentially, where we would say, okay, product is approved in terms of silhouette, in terms of pattern, in terms of blocks, or what have you, and then it is available to produce at the closest, the most proximate location to the customer, which is the way data distribution works for a lot of public cloud infrastructure. And it sounds as though this is essentially that.
Absolutely. And let's not forget as well, that there's a large part of the price we pay on a ticket item is the logistics piece, right? So, and we're a bit beholden to that. So you buy something out of the UK, you live in the US, you've got to pay sometimes import duties, you've got to pay, large shipping items, etc. But, a US brand that wants to open up in Europe that doesn't necessarily want to open up a footprint or have premises or physical premises, etc. We just enable them through our fulfillment network. We cover the globe, as I said earlier on. So, there's no market we can't reach for any particular brand or retailer. And it's all managed by us through our network. So it's very seamless and easy. So it removes so many of those barriers and limitations that exist. DTG is running and working well now. We're building our network of our micro factories to enable that. That's, that, as I said, that's slightly behind in terms of where we were from a DTG perspective. We took that to market first, and now we're moving ahead with our microfactory facilities. And we'll see a global network of those that will just be doing on-demand production.
With the microfactories, are you finding that these are mostly established manufacturers who are kind of buying into new technology, or are you actually finding that there are people building new businesses around the opportunities presented by digital when it comes to producing?
It's a bit of a combination, actually. I guess digital transformation creates entrepreneurship. People spot ideas and spot trends, and they want to address those. So we've seen some people move into that from maybe related industries. Perhaps somebody that was doing promotional kind of work, or had already got some idea of how to service consumers through that through that web interface. But many of them are coming from our traditional printer kind of textile environment. So, we've got a great company in Italy that's running our technology now, doing some high-end fashion work for us, producing the inserts, personalized inserts into handbags, for example, on nice silks. Creates huge value. It's not specifically sort of core fashion, but I think it demonstrates the capability that the technology has. So they're a traditional print supplier. We've got new digital elements. So people that maybe have started work with us on the direct to garment side of the printing, which is an easier to address in some respects concept. But they're now buying from us the roll to roll or the digital direct to fabric printing, and enabling it that way as well. So it's a combination, but we're fortunate enough that there's lots of interest at the moment.
Another key area where I think consumer demand is likely to drive brand and retail business model evolution is customization and personalization. But people are buying products that they want to last, and they're also looking for products that are uniquely theirs, that they feel expresses who they are. So this level of personalization is something that traditional value chains have really struggled to provide. But even the stepping stone that smaller run production represents, even that's been difficult to deliver for traditional supply chains for various reasons: minimum order quantities, shipping timelines, all these other sides of things. What role do you see digital playing in A, those shorter production runs, but B, moving beyond that to real kind of personalization, customization, real make on demand, if you like?
Yeah, we see, again, looking at the two different kind of segments that we've got. So we see huge customization already within the direct to garment printing side of our business. The majority of our customers offer that customization. So, traditionally you walk into a shop, you see a color of a t-shirt you buy, and you take, or a printed t-shirt, you take that, and that's what you tend to buy. Now, sometimes they've got varieties of different colors or maybe different styles, etc., but not that often because they're limited on retail space. Online, as I've touched on briefly before, you can choose your t-shirt, whether it's long sleeve, short sleeve, collar, no collar, v-neck, crew neck, etc. Then you can add in the different color of the t-shirt you want, and then you can choose the image that you want onto it, and then you can choose where that image gets laid down, on the front, on the back, on the sleeve, etc., large, small. So that's full customization that isn't achievable in any other way but digital. So that's really driven a lot of this success that we've seen on our direct to garment side of things. We do obviously enable personalization as well, where people can then put up, or they put their names on them, etc., etc. But ultimately, we're seeing that, our run lengths, if you like, rather than the traditional methodologies of 3 or 5 or 1,000 or whatever it might be, our traditional run lengths are kind of 1 or 2. We're printing for 1 or maybe 2 people if it's something that's needed. So that side of things is enabled through workflow, through software, and those kind of things, and is running and is very successful right now. On the direct to fabric side of things, we see that we are just on the verge of being able to create that customization piece. So as I've said before, the real thing for us at the moment is that, you know, you buy a dress or you buy a shirt or you buy something online or from a shop, etc., and you're restricted to exactly how it looks. What we're working with some of the software at the moment is to enable an image that may cover the whole of the dress at the moment, but maybe you want to reduce it down and just put it on the bottom right hand corner, or maybe over the shoulder. And that's completely in the hands, and that's available now. That's completely in the hands of the consumer. And the real benefits of that are, everybody wants to be individual, everybody wants self-expression. So the ability to make something for me that nobody else has creates great value, increases margin potential for brands and retailers. But for the consumer, ultimately gives you that feeling that actually this is something I've made for me, so I'm going to hold on to it for longer.
Tied to the personalization element is the question of scale. So whether we're talking individual MOQ1 personalization or a broader shift from being forecasting based and reactive to actual demand driven production, people are always going to ask whether it's possible to actually do this at scale. Is it possible to do this at volume? Is it possible to take proof of concepts like microfactories, things they might have seen, and extrapolate that to volume production runs? What's your perspective on how digital goes from, or whether it needs to go from those smaller production runs and microfactories to larger volume production?
Another great question, Ben. I think, to be honest, the answer is yes. I think absolutely we can see scale. If you look at, you know, the model at the moment, which is you know, largely unsustainable, producing in bulk, selling it cheaply, or getting a lower entry price on cheapness, etc., it's unsustainable because, for all the reasons we've discussed. I think for us, what we're seeing is this globalization of print, in the sense of it's a distribution and then print basis, which, when you look at it in that way and have distribution or print distribution centers across the globe, then you're breaking down the very large bulk elements into small bite-sized pieces and producing next to, you know, next to consumers from a proximity perspective. We're seeing it already on the DTG side of the business. So that's working. You know, that's a proof of concept that is now scalable and working in a really, really great way. And, you know, whilst we only have at the moment, I think, you know, 1% of the 21 billion t-shirts that are produced globally, decorated globally at the moment, is being done digitally, the acceleration on that is phenomenal. From the other aspect of the production on demand of clothing, as we start to see more and more adoption, it will only accelerate more and more, because the rest of the brands will have to adopt this methodology. Otherwise, the consumers will vote with their feet and go where they get the choice. And that's why this will work. And as we've seen in, you know, many other digital transformation pieces, you know, industries, once that tipping point comes, the acceleration is phenomenal. And I don't think we've actually seen the tipping point just yet. I think, you know, you go back to a digital camera marketplace where everybody said it would never work because you don't ever print your photos, bang, it's gone. And then you see spin-off businesses where they produce photo books, and those all digital, and nobody thought it would ever happen initially. You know, we're at that very much the same point now. It's about change, and it's about change within the brands and within the retailers, of them understanding how they can achieve the same element of revenues and commercialization, but actually serve their consumers better, but in a more responsible way. So the automation piece that we've got, the joining up the dots, if you like, of how does a brand at the moment get something produced in Australia? They don't. They tend to produce it in the Far East, and then they'll ship it down and hold it in storage. That's how it's done today. The methodology that we give them is, don't get it produced in the Far East or Near East, etc. In fact, hold it virtually, design it once and then distribute and then print. It's very similar to what we've seen in other industries. And that's why we're extremely confident, especially with our Kornit X, which is the workflow element I touched on previously. That's the enabler, that's the game changer, because it enables that joining up element. It's like the super highway that will go around the globe and enable that demand to be produced and fulfilled, which is why I do believe that we're going to see it really accelerating over the coming years.
One last question from my point of view would be, what it takes to pull all of this together. Now, you mentioned workflow a couple of times, but I want to zero in on that a bit, because there's been a steady migration, or well, a steady migration to e-commerce before COVID, and then a very sudden flashpoint towards e-commerce as part of the pandemic. So from both a technical and a process point of view, what does it actually look like to take an e-commerce order and to then produce it? What does it mean for retailers to integrate their digital selling platforms with their digital production and their logistics?
So Kornit X, which is our platform, which has really been specifically built to enable that on-demand world, it sort of sits on the brands or the retailers' websites, but sort of in background, but it's seamless. So there's pop-up windows that allow customization behind the scenes. So it's a seamless experience from a consumer that doesn't know what part we're running and what part the traditional brand is running, etc. And by the way, that's exactly how we want it. Because we want them just to have that very simple experience, the ability to look at 3D rendering so you can turn things around, understand how your product's going to look, the ability to, as I said, customize, etc. That's all driven by us. So that consumer opportunity is, or consumer demand or choice is there. And then once it then hits the basket and the checkout's done, I mean, again, the great thing is you sell it, then you make it. So the money's up front. There's no cash flow issues, which you have in the traditional methodologies. And then that's where the clever stuff comes in. So that's where the brand or the retailer that's tied into a fulfillment provider or a print provider, it will look at where that print provider is located, where the consumer is located. It seamlessly routes it through. The print provider is already certified as part of the Kornit fulfillment network, and that's happening at the moment. There's consumers that are seamlessly sellers buying their products and receiving them supposedly from the brand, but it's coming from a printer just down the road in all of the packaging, etc. So the whole thing is done in a very seamless way, and we really believe that that's the game changer, because it's joining the dots up, it's joining the two parts up that historically have not really been working together. The brand has really demanded from a print provider, this is what I need and this is how many I need. Now it turns it around and says, you just take care of all of that for me. I can reduce my distribution centers, I can reduce my inventory, and it really, it will take some time to change because it is a mindset shift. But really for us, it's the enabler for all of this to come together. And that's why we see it as, as significantly a significant game changer for us.
So, Chris, thank you so much. I really appreciate your perspective here, and it's been fascinating from my point of view to really dig into the game-changing potential around digital. If you want to leave us with an idea of what's next for Kornit, what's next for the industry, then that would be a great way to finish.
Yeah, great. Look, Ben, it's been great to have some time to chat with you, and I hope that you can sort of see where we are on our journey as a company. And our intent is to really drive that operating system within the fashion industry. We believe the component parts we've got with very proven and fantastic technology. The software that we're now running is absolutely the glue in the middle that joins the dots up. We're covering all the spectrums of fashion. We didn't touch much on the sports apparel industry, but that's another one that we're really strong on, and maybe we can talk about that as we launch our new technology later in the year. Our latest technology in the Kornit Max is Atlas Max is again, it moves us to another level in terms of retail quality, in terms of some of the creativity, addressing embroidery, addressing 3D capability as well. So we're constantly pushing the boundaries to enable change and to enable choice. The future for us at the moment is extremely exciting. We're absolutely, believe ourselves to be that central operating system that's really going to drive this to a sustainable business model for both us and for our customers, and most importantly for the consumers. So thanks very much indeed for the opportunity, and look forward to chatting again soon.
Thank you, Chris.